into positions of hopelessness and helplessness. The government gives them the drugs, builds bigger prisons, passes a 3-strike law, and then wants us to sing God Bless America. No, no, no. Not God Bless America. God damn America. That's in the Bible for killing innocent people. God damn America for treating us citizens as less than human. God damn America as long as she tries to act like she is God and she is supreme.
Welcome back.
Ahoy,
to
hoy.
the God Damn America podcast, the God Socialist podcast for stupid children. I am one of your hosts, Alex Patak. Thanks for tuning in. I'm here with my right-hand man, Anders Lee.
Anders Lee here on Alex's right.
Anders is carefully stationed to my right, lest he betray me.
Do they say if you're a left-handed person, do you say my left-hand man?
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's always polite when meeting someone before figuring out where they stand in your power structure. Ask, by the way, no pressure. Which hand do you prefer? I just want to make sure I'm getting everything correct.
When you shake hands. Or
Yeah,
when
if you're arranging a cabinet, if you're arranging a royal court, you need to know where everybody stands in that sense.
Yeah. I think
It's often been said the woke movement is kind of like modern day chivalry in a way, and kind of like you just have to think of it like back in the day, hands were in play.
Interesting. I think that handshakes might be done because for a while, even before COVID, for a while people were saying like this is not. I think they may have done an entire 60 minutes segment about why we should abolish the handshake. Because
why was that?
It's just spreading germs. You know, somebody's got a cold. No, you have a cold just from being polite, right?
This sounds like propaganda from people who can't do cool handshakes.
Yeah, it's just handshake envy.
Yeah. You know, like anybody who's like you go to do like a slap kind of thing. They're like, I went in for the high five. You know, that whole block. Who do you think runs the Times Magazine Corporation? Bad handshake people.
Well, people, I mean, I think it is true of the elite. This is certainly true of Trump, right?
Absolutely.
That he didn't like shaking hands with the common folk.
He did the power grasp. Whenever he had to shake hands, he'd like grab you and pull you into him so as to be like, I take all my germs. My whole arm of germs.
Trump did that?
Yeah, you didn't see that? Like whenever he would meet a world leader, he would grab their hand and then pull them into his body as hard as he could.
Oh, well, world leaders, yeah. But not like his supporters.
No, that's what I'm saying. It's like a hierarchy thing.
Mm-hmm. I wonder though if somebody is left-handed, do you just like shake with your right hand anyway? Because when I've shook hands with people, I always just do the right hand without even thinking, and they go with that.
Yeah, it is. I think it is common practice. A right hand, hello. We both have hands.
Okay,
let's meet in the middle.
Is that sort of discriminatory against left-handed people, or maybe not? Because it's not difficult to shake hands, right?
It's easy enough. Anybody can do it. Yep.
Yeah. And you got to use, like, right now I am holding the microphone with my left hand because I'm someone who actually I'm very right-handed. I can't, it's my handwriting is bad enough as it is, but if I write left-handed.
Anders went to a special school for right-handed boys.
I mean, like, you got to use the other hand for something. So it's probably better for left-handed people to have the handshake with the right hand because that, otherwise, there's too much pressure on the left hand at all times.
As someone who watches a lot of Dragon Ball Z, which is how I introduce myself at parties now, it is always a boon, a benefit to have a secret that the other person does not know about. And if that means we've shaken hands with my right hand, but my left hand is far more powerful than that, I think that could kind of be a big boost to your self-esteem, kind of get you that big job interview you're looking for or whatever.
Right. Well, that's right. Because grew up with the messaging that your handshake says a lot about you, and you have to show that you have character by.
I'm picturing
having
your
a-
dad saying all this shit. Anders, we're doing handshake practice again.
Well, my dad actually was
Anders.
sort of immune to the handshake wonders of William Jefferson Clinton, who when my dad worked in public radio, they had on Clinton's last year, they had like some public radio thing at the White House before he got canned, and Bill Clinton shook hands with him, and he has a picture of it, and he was immune to his charm. Because Bill Clinton he's a handshake artist, right? He leans in. It's like he's making love via handshake.
Many people have said this.
Yeah, he works the handshakee. And I asked my dad, what happened when he shook your hand? And he's like, he said something to me and I couldn't hear him. So I nodded and said, yes, Mr. President.
I was not impressed. Slick Willie tried his finest hand games on me and came home a loser.
Yeah, he's the hypnotist, really, but it doesn't work on everybody. But
not today, Willie.
But I don't know what my real handshake is because I grew up with that messaging. So it's like, oh, I just got to have a firm handshake. So that's what I just do.
I
don't know if that's
handshake.
Yeah, but it's put on. I just do it because that's what I've been told that I'm supposed to do. I don't know what my real handshake is.
It's not your goofy real handshake self. You have like a closeted handshake, you're saying? I
don't know. It's hard to say what the real handshake is because I know somebody, there's a comic, Dan Perlman, who has intention. He is unapologetic about having I don't want to say a weak handshake, but a light grip handshake, a no grip handshake. It's
pretty weak.
Yeah, but he's like, I don't like to use unnecessary force and energy on a handshake. It's pointless, right? It's a waste of energy. Why would I do that?
Sounds like an excuse to me, but
But that's ultimately that's ultimately more of an alpha move and more of a high confidence move than just overcompensating like I do and gripping as hard as I possibly can on other people's hands, which we're probably not going to do anymore.
That's true.
Because of COVID.
And Dan is an alpha in a way. What are we talking about today? We have on.
We are talking about the handshake of the two hands of labor embracing each other. We're talking about that meme that is the black muscular hand and the white muscular hand uniting,
right?
And yes,
the two hands, let's be clear, are not capital and labor. It's labor and organizing. And then capital is a different hand that's not shaking anything. Maybe it's a fist.
Capital is wanking off right now. With the Can
you picture that like in the meme, like it's the two arms and then there's like just naked guy behind just jerking off too.
I mean, the sweat and the secretion that is developed between the two workers' hands trickles down and is used as lubricant for the capitalist hand to pleasure itself.
Oh my God. Let's just say the guest name. It's Maximilian Alvarez. We're very excited to have him on. We're going to talk about labor in America. That's all we have to say.
Yes, and Jake is absent.
And send him your love. Let's go to the tape. On the computer now. Bring us in whenever.
Jacob, why don't you put on a little makeup?
Do it again. Start from the top.
I'm doing a rendition of System of a Down. Jake is having some health issues today. He's under the weather.
Why don't we just say Jake couldn't be here?
Jake couldn't be here. Yeah, to Jacob, why don't you put a little makeup? That's my.
You want to? Okay.
Jake's dead. He'll be back next week. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for clarifying. We are joined, though, by a special guest. Me and Alex are Maximilian Alvarez, who is the host of Working People Podcast, as well as the editor-in-chief of the Real News Network. Thanks for being here.
Hell yeah. Thanks for having me, guys.
That's so exciting that I remember when I used to watch the Real News when I was like a teenager, and it was just Paul J in his garage, just this like adorable little Canadian man who somehow was able to interview like Susan Rice and would politely ask her about the Iraq War. That's great that there are a lot of projects that are happening over there. How's that been going?
Yeah, man, I appreciate you asking. I mean, it's been it's been a roller coaster for sure since I took the job in October. I mean, like every other media company during the pandemic, it's been tough sledding, right? I mean, and we even, like a lot of other companies, we got massive funding cuts and layoffs like right after I started, which fucking sucked. And we've been rebuilding, but I think like really heading in an exciting direction given the circumstances. We're having this conversation a week after I was able to go down to Bessemer, Alabama for the Real News Network, talk to Amazon workers and organizers with the RWDSU down there in Birmingham, Alabama. I got to interview Danny Glover, who's a Real News Network board member, about the Amazon union drive. And that interview's out now, and it was definitely one of the highlights of my career / life. And like you said, Anders, like, the reason that I took the job, like before this, I was working at the Chronicle of Higher Education at the opinion section. And I was enjoying that job. I loved the people there. And during a pandemic, I wasn't particularly looking to kind of like jump ship into the great unknown when so much was, so much is going on and there's so much precarity everywhere. But what really kind of made the decision for me was what you just said, was like all the cool and amazing and brilliant people at the Real News who were doing cool, amazing shit under one roof. Like you guys, right? I've been out here kind of hustling, as an independent kind of left media maker for many years. And that's kind of just the life that I've gotten used to. And I didn't really think that places like the Real News still existed in the wild. But when I saw that, it's like, man, you got former lieutenant of security of the Baltimore Black Panther Party, and Eddie Conway, who was a political prisoner for 44 years. Yeah. He now hosts a show at the Real News where he interviews the victims of mass incarceration. Like that's fucking cool, right? Yeah. And Eddie is just such an incredible figure, and he's so brilliant. He's got so much wisdom. So I get to work with that guy every day. I get to work with Stephen Janis and Taya Graham, who have a show called the Police Accountability Report, where they report on police corruption and the grassroots movement to hold police accountable. Mark Steiner, radio legend, Jessel Noor, Lisa Snowden McCrae. It's just a really great and incredible group of people. And we're doing really cool shit. And I hope that, people take notice, because we're pouring everything we've got into it.
Making real ass news for real ass dudes.
That's right. That's our new motto.
Can I ask, just out of curiosity, because, as a former tradesman of the independent political media yourself, what's the schedule change like switching over to an actual company? Can you still sleep till noon and start the Kratom day?
That was literally the hardest part. Literally the hardest part about making this transition was going from my podcaster and writer schedule of staying up till 4 a.m. and getting up at 11 to going to back to a real human being kind of schedule. I used to work at a lot of shitty jobs, but this time 10 years ago, I was working as a temp in factories and warehouses. And I would get up at 4 a.m. and go work a 12-hour shift. And now I'm I don't know how I fucking did that. And it's hard enough. Right,
I'm not going back.
I won't go back. You can't make me.
That's a podcast harder than I've ever recorded.
Yeah. So it was definitely a tough adjustment.
Yeah. Well, speaking of tough adjustments, the essential workers of the country, are so-called, are now having to adjust to the post-COVID economy is supposedly right around the corner.
10 out of 10 segue.
Thank you. But we are struggling to segue into the post-COVID economy. It's the disease is still rampant, and of course, we're speaking today just after the passage of the COVID relief package through the Senate, which will be kicked back to the House. But one thing that has been, circulating on social media is Kirsten Cinema, excuse me, voted.
Kirsten said she's a dog. That's important to understand.
Is that a common dog name, Cinnamon? Because I know one dog named Cinnamon, and I always thought that was an original name. But
I used to have a dog named Cinnamon. So this is
dang.
I mean,
Might as well be Rex.
Yeah, as someone with the most common dog name of all time, this is the only area in which I sympathize with Kirsten Cinema.
The dog name caucus recognizes her, but does not approve of her actions.
I mean,
exactly.
I certainly sympathize with Cinema circa, a lot of S's there, circa 2002 or wherever, when she was a sort of a lefty Green Party activist, right? But something snapped somewhere along the line. I don't know how this happens, to the point where, I mean, this is sort of not exactly a very fruitful question or endeavor to try and like psychoanalyze with her inner workings, but like, what is this genuine? The fact that she's voting this down, is this just pure calculation and careerism, or does she actually believe in, you got to uphold the Senate rules and uphold the will of the parliamentarian and prevent people from getting a raise? Or like, what do you guys think is going on in that ridiculous mind?
Do you know when she switched?
Yeah, that's hard to. I think it was within.
I also think just for the sake of clarity, what everybody's talking about is not only that she voted against a minimum wage raise as a Democrat, but she did it with like a twirl and a thumbs down, like she was slam dunking away the possibility of more money. It's really you got to watch the video.
And then she opened an umbrella and floated off right after the. Oh yeah,
but it's sexist to mention that.
Right.
Comment on her body language, which is like what basically the establishment telling us it's sexist to trust what you see with your own eyes, right? Everyone saw it. We know what it was. We know the statement she was making. And now in the most kind of like cynical fucking fashion, they're trying to weaponize, this neoliberal form of identity politics to shield an objectively shitty person who did an objectively shitty thing from any accountability from the people whom she and her colleagues just fucked over.
This is one of the best examples of the playbook too, because it's not only, if you comment on our female representatives' body language, you're a sexist. Is it or is it not sexist? Because that is a whole discussion that all of us get mired in all of the time in every form of media. But it's just that you are no longer talking about the issue anymore. The second we start talking about her twirl or whatever, and they're just going to press this button anytime anything you don't like happens until it doesn't work anymore, which I don't think it's going to stop working anytime soon.
I think it's a really, really great point. Like back when in the days when I wanted to be an academic, right? Like the one thing I miss about academia is teaching. Like I loved teaching with my students. And I did a lot of like focus on media and politics. And I taught this one class back in 2016 while the election was going on, about how American politics became a reality show, right? And we started trying to kind of analyze what was in front of us by giving it some historical and theoretical context. I promise I have a point here. There's an old historian named Daniel Borstein who wrote a book, what is it called? The Image, but it's about a concept that he calls the pseudo event, right? And like you just said, Alex, like what we are seeing here with Kirsten Cinema is the classic example of what Borstein called a pseudo event, where the actual event, the actual thing that we are all pissed about, which is working people in this country, even before the pandemic, have been fucked over 3 ways from Sunday. Like working people are working so far behind everybody else. The deck legally, politically, economically, socially is so stacked in favor of the bosses, in favor of the establishment that serves the interests of capital, yada, 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 that working people are really just like fighting for scraps to maintain what shreds of dignity this world has still left for us. And a $15 minimum wage is not even close to what we need. And it's not even close to all that has been stolen from us over the years. And yet the Congress filled with like rich people who have completely lost connection to the people that they're supposed to serve can't even bring themselves to raise that floor even a little bit, regardless of how out of step the current minimum wage is with the cost of living. And then you add in the kind of, you know, the horrors of the pandemic. Working people are in dire straits right now. And you have these ghouls in down the road from me in DC who with such unchecked glee deny so much to so many so regularly and feel so little about it that like everyone from your gut, you know why you're pissed off about this. But within a span of like less than 24 hours, the debate has suddenly been whether or not criticizing Kirsten Sinema for this is sexist or not. We have moved the shift. We have shifted the frame of this debate to the point where now we have this pseudo debate that serves the function of taking our focus off the real issue here. And it drives me insane.
Not to mention, I mean, the key thing for this, because in terms of politicians screwing over working people, that's a day-to-day event for them. But the key, the cherry on top to this entire situation is we just had an election where they all ran on raising the minimum wage 2 months ago. What day is it? Like this is the only thing Democrats care about is being caught in the act, and we just did it. But they've realized, due to this phenomenon that our internet poisoned listeners are surely familiar with, that if they just remind us they can go back to, is the dress blue or white, we will forget what we're talking about, and it doesn't matter what you do anymore. We're just dogs at this point.
I mean, it's almost as if she did this intentionally, because her constituency are the people who like to have this very, sort of false flag almost sort of debate about, decorum and
it was a false flag debate.
Microaggressions.
Look at who planted the points.
Yeah. I mean, I do want to talk about, the $15 minimum wage, right? That's it's a goal, I guess, that, Sanders ran on, Biden adopted. I'm for it, right? But if you were to peg the minimum wage to inflation, and this is what, when Republican politicians say like, oh, I used to work on, $6 an hour. I was like, okay, what year was that? You want to adjust your wage in 1972 for inflation, it would be $25 an hour or something like that. So it's still way behind inflation. The proposed
crazy how often that point is made, by the way, for how easy a riddle that is to solve.
Yeah.
Right. And even like if you avoid focusing on like the obvious kind of ridiculousness of that statement, the thing that really sticks with me, it kind of going back to your original question, Anders, like, is this genuine or is it cynical, right? And there's really no good option here, right? Yeah. Like if you have these politicians saying, oh yeah, I made $6 an hour and it made me a better person. It's like, motherfucker, yeah, that would be like earning $25 today. You're making our fucking point. So then the real question is, are you doing that to be a cynical shithead who is in the service of companies and corporations who want to keep labor down and want to pay working people as little as possible? Or are you that fucking stupid, and are all the people that you work with that fucking out of touch that you can't even calculate the contradiction within the statement that you just made? There's really no good option there. I don't know which one I would prefer.
I genuinely believe it's the second one for most members of Congress. And the distinction that they don't make is I made $6 an hour and it made me a better person. And now I am a member of Congress and I make six figures. And that is not what happens for most people. There's not like a hard time you can laugh about later. You just live there.
Well, and it's baffling to me because the other argument is like, oh, if we raise the minimum wage to $15, there are teenagers, right, who are dependents they're in high school and they're going to be all of a sudden making $15 an hour. Like that whole notion that you would say that undermines the entire idea of capitalism, right? When you get a job and you get a wage, they don't ask you like, oh, well, what are your expenses, right? That's not how the system works. That's not how it's supposed to work anyway, right?
Why can't we all just be at the top of the pyramid? If all the base of the pyramid was at the top with me, there wouldn't be a problem. I don't see what the problem is.
Well, I mean, and in regards to the pyramid thing, right? I mean, just to kind of, I know that like in a lot of ways we're preaching to the choir, right? I mean, people who listen to Pod Damn America like already know this, but it's worth underscoring, right? That we're not just talking about the ways that advancement for working people has stalled for so long. And there are a lot of factors that go into that, right? The decline in unionization, the kind of coordinated, systematic, decades-long attack on unions themselves, from the culture industry, from politicians, from companies, yada, yada, yada. We can also talk about, like what we're talking about now, right? Like how politicians have worked to depress wages and not keep them up with inflation or cost of living, right? I mean, essentially, we're still living in Alan Greenspan's fucking like world, right? Where he said like creating insecurity for workers is good for, quote, the economy. Like that is what the system wants, because it creates this standing army of just precarious workers who will subject themselves to whatever conditions the bosses create, because we have to make a fucking living. We have to put a roof over our heads. The point that I'm making, though, is that we have that worker side of it, but at the same time that all that has been going on, the 1%, the ruling class, whatever you want to call them, has been increasing their power and influence, consolidating it, not just in the US, but worldwide at the same time. These two things go hand in hand. Like if you look at, there's a great graph, I think it's from the Economic Policy Institute, that shows, right, the graph of kind of the union density in the United States and the share of income, right? And there are other graphs that show like union density and like the overall share of wealth in this country. At around 1980, when Reagan took office and he broke the PATCO strike, and it was then declared open season on unions, those two lines go in completely opposite directions, and we are still living within that trend. The lower we go, the less share that we get of the value that we create. The more of that value has gone to the top 1%, the more they have used that consolidated wealth and power to shore up their hegemony and to continue fucking over working people, right? This is what class war looks like. And I know that everyone feels that in their gut, but I just really wanted to kind of highlight it, that is the context for everything we're talking about, from Kirsten Cinema to Amazon. It's all part of a kind of endless class war that I think for most of our lives in our generation, we were told like it wasn't happening, right? And now after the Great Recession, I think more people realized, oh shit, it is, right? And we're very far behind.
This last year especially, right? We live in the crucible. This is the test. You get Kristen Cinemas going out there voting their feelings with a big thumbs down on this minimum wage thing, because there is no fear of working class politics right now. Even in a situation where we've all been forced into our homes, 500,000 Americans died, and the billionaire class like made what, like 20% additional revenue to their wealth, some obscene number, just billions and billions of dollars added to the top of this thing. That's all this money is just getting buried underground while everybody dies. How much pressure as a society can we cook up right now before it follows through to the very insulated political core? And it is what keeps me up night, because I don't know how to reach these people.
Well, and like if you bring in Amazon to that discussion, right? Just to really hammer home your point, Alex, is Jeff fucking Bezos, right? The founder and current CEO of Amazon. He said he's going to step down in like the summer, whatever. He increased his wealth by over $70 billion with a B in 2020 alone, right? I mean, like just that is $1 billion is more money than any of us are going to see in our lifetime, right? It's as astronomical for us to conceive of as the size of the universe. Then you multiply that by 70, then you realize that that is just what he made in the last year, right? I mean, it really is. I think it's impossible to really conceptualize with the limited human brains that we have just how disparate, right, the power, wealth, and influence is between people like Jeff Bezos and companies like Amazon and the rest of us who are doing what we can to survive.
That is a fun game, right? Take a number you can't imagine, multiply it by 70.
Yeah, I mean, I heard you say that on podcast recently, and I just was like, that must be a mistake. And I looked it up, $75 billion for one guy in the past year. It's insane. And that's why, you know, I think this was a couple years ago, the Amazon workers nationally, he was able to raise it, or he was pressured to raise their wage to $15 an hour. And that was like a nice thing that everybody sort of applauded. Right. But it seems like there is some sort of a little bit of a resentment when Amazon workers, especially in Bessemer, hear that, right? Because that's still not enough money. And there's a lot of other conditions that have galvanized them to unionize, that the $15 minimum wage has not ameliorated. What are some of the reasons that they are now voting to join a union?
Right. Well, I mean, you know, just I guess even to go back to that, why did Amazon raise its wage to 15 in the first place? Because story after story had been coming out for years about the horrifying conditions in their warehouses, and not just, you know, like the conditions that their warehouse workers were working under, but that really was the focus, right? I mean, we saw all the stories of Amazon workers. I think the story that broke was like Amazon warehouse workers in the UK having to piss in bottles because they could not really take a break to find a bathroom, because Amazon has this really truly dystopian kind of surveillance apparatus that it itself has developed. And that it's also, just a kind of quick footnote, Amazon is also selling surveillance technology to law enforcement, right? Jesus. Amazon is not just the e-commerce giant that we think it is. Amazon, this is one thing that I've been trying to stress, I guess, like along with trying to get people to see just how rich Jeff Bezos is, I've been trying to emphasize just how influential Amazon is as an entity, right? Because it's not just e-commerce, right? It is cloud storage, it is surveillance, it is government contracts, it is international, right? There's a lot, however big you think Amazon is, double it or triple it, right? Because do some digging into the things that they are doing. It's not just putting like little Alexas in our houses, you know, it's also creating like entire smart houses and smart towns in places like Southern California, where the level of surveillance is the stuff of nightmares. It's the stuff that we were told in movies growing up that we should be afraid of. And yet we are living comfortably with it, or we are living with the kind of realization that we can't do anything about it. And that's why I think, workers unionizing is such a significant issue of democracy, right? Because Amazon is, it has more power and influence over our lives than most entities, whether you're talking about the government or the market, right? It is, and like Alex was saying, especially after the COVID-19 pandemic, which basically just catalyzed the process that was already kind of going on, where, you know, we've seen it. Small businesses have been wiped off the table, so many of them, so many kind of industries that depended on kind of in-person customers, whether it be movie, cinemas and stuff like that, have tanked, right? And Amazon has been one of the biggest beneficiaries. It has been able to kind of absorb more of the economy into itself, like this great blob, right? That really, like I said, extends to so many areas of our lives. And yet, even though this entity has more power over our lives than most other entities, we have virtually no say over what Amazon does or how it does it, right? And that's where the kind of long-standing American ideology of the divide between market and government really kicks in, because people don't call that government, even though it has a governmental influence over our lives, right?
Right.
It shapes our abilities and expectations for what we can order, where we can work, when we're being watched, so on and so forth, right? The culture that we consume through Amazon services, yada yada yada. But because it's part of the quote private market, we don't feel like we have any right to claim that we should have a say in what Amazon is doing. But workers in the rank and file unionizing at Amazon facilities is part of that struggle, right? It is a struggle for workers to have the fundamental right to a democratic say in their own working conditions, right? They should have a say. All workers deserve to have a say in the conditions they live and labor under. I mean, we spend most of our goddamn lives at work, and yet we feel like we have no ability to tell, the bosses or these companies, like, hey, you're actually like really dehumanizing people, and that shouldn't be the case. It's a part of our brain that has been systematically taken out through cultural and ideological air conditioning for centuries. And this is when it really starts to kick in. But unions and the labor movement have been pushing against that for a long time. And that is kind of really where I think a lot of the excitement, a lot of the fervor is coming from. And I heard it from these workers and these organizers when I was talking to them, because they weren't just focusing on the $15 minimum wage at Amazon, right? They did say, it's like, well, Amazon only raised this wage because it was coming under such fire for its horrible working conditions. But right now, the $15 that Amazon is giving us is still below the industry standard. It's still not enough, right? They did talk about that. They obviously talked about the benefits that that Amazon says it gives to workers. But we can talk about that in a bit. Those benefits in a lot of ways mean nothing because Amazon has such high turnover, because it breaks its workers down and pushes them so hard that so few of them can stay on long enough to actually get those benefits in any sort of meaningful way. So we did talk about that. But beyond that, the workers there are they're very cognizant of the fact that, like, this is much bigger than that, right? This is a fight that is connected to the labor struggle in the South and the tradition thereof. It's connected to the labor struggle, around the country and worldwide. And it is a fundamental issue of democracy, right? The ability of working people to say, like, we make the world that we live in. You guys just scoop off all the profits. We should have more of a say in how this system is built, how it's run, and what it does to workers like us. Right. Sorry, that was a long rant.
No, that was great. I mean, yeah, I definitely want to zoom in on sort of the labor struggle in the South that you mentioned, because that's a very interesting region for a lot of reasons. But historically, that has, especially in Bessemer, there's been a lot of struggle there. If you read Robin G. Kelly's Hammer and Hoe, I believe that was a site of some labor struggle with the Communist Party in the 1930s. But now the South has really become sort of a place for manufacturing to move, right? We think of, I remember when I was 12, we moved to St. Paul, Minnesota, and there was a Ford plant there that was kind of like the base hub of industry there. And it was union. And I remember hearing a couple years after I moved there, oh, it's going to be moving. The Ford plant is packing up and going away. And I assumed, like, it must be going to Mexico. No, it was going to Kentucky because of the union, right? St. Paul's a union town. Kentucky is not a union state for the most part. Volkswagen a few years ago got a deal to go to Tennessee. They negotiated something with the governor, and the condition for them building the Volkswagen plant in Tennessee was that they had, and this is by request of the government, they had to agree to not let a union form at the plant as a condition of building a plant there. So can you talk about, like, how that has increased the sort of the industrialization in the South over the past couple of decades, and how the workers there, in some respects, are starting to reach a breaking point where that the anti-union propaganda isn't working as well as it used to, and we might be at the precipice of a serious shift on the relationship between labor and capital in the South.
Yeah, yeah, hell yeah. I mean, and just a kind of quick kind of follow up on that point, because I think it's a really important one, and it's something that we've talked to a number of folks about on my podcast, Working People. Right? You know, I remember I think I did a bonus episode recently with Peter Eichler, who's a scholar who studies kind of working class communities in New England, right? And kind of like formerly industrialized kind of towns in places like it's this little town in Rhode Island that he talked about, but used to be more of an industrial
Quahog.
town. Quahog, right? and you know, like a lot of places in the Rust Belt, right? You know, the main kind of, I think it was textiles, right? You know, like the main industry there picked up and moved and left kind of destruction in its wake. But where did those operations move, right? They didn't move to third world countries, quote unquote, yet. They moved to the South, right? Because the South has been an anti-union, anti-regulation stronghold for U.S. companies for a long time, right? It has almost been kind of like the way station of on the way to kind of, you know, exporting operations to you know, underdeveloped countries where workers can be exploited even more, where labor costs are even lower, and where there are fewer protections for workers, including in places like Mexico and South Asia and so on and so forth, right? So yeah, the South has served that purpose, and that is not by accident. That has been that is a system that has been created over many decades. But you know, the other point that I wanted to make before I kind of really dig into your question, Anders, is like the point about Kentucky is an interesting one because I think it connects to this, right? Because there have been some pretty high profile union drives in the South, and pretty high profile losses, right? There was, you know, like the auto workers one. There was big losses at Nissan in Mississippi, Boeing in South Carolina, and Volkswagen in Tennessee. But and in the same way in Kentucky, there is actually a proud kind of worker and union tradition in Kentucky,
Right.
but it's with industries like the auto industry that do not have the kind of major role in the economy that they used to, which includes coal and includes, yeah, like a lot of steel working in kind of the cities like Louisville, right? And there still are kind of, you know, union. I've talked to some good steel workers in places like Louisville, but to your point, it's like, those industries do not have the kind of centrality in our political economy that they used to, that used to give workers more of a leg up. They had more leverage because these industries were more crucial to our economy, whether that be coal or auto working, right? You know, that's not the case anymore. With Amazon, that's different. Amazon, as we just said, has become very central to the functioning of our political economy. And not only Amazon itself, but the fulfillment center in Bessemer has become a very crucial point in Amazon's kind of vast network of operations. And that's built into the story of Bessemer itself and this facility. I went to that facility, right? It's like kind of in the middle of nowhere. And it's massive. It's like multiple football fields stacked on top of each other. And it sits on the site that used to be where steel mills were, where the steel workers had a stronghold. And Bessemer itself is a place that has been ravaged by deindustrialization, right? Birmingham and Bessemer, that whole area used to be, you know, back in the early 20th century and before, like they were big strongholds for steel and iron ore mining, steel manufacturing, coal and iron ore mining. But again, like with Kentucky, those kind of industries, the more that they have declined, and the more that kind of industrial operations have folded up and moved elsewhere or just folded up entirely, the workers there have been left to kind of, you know, fend for themselves with the opportunities that are available, which for a long time have been very little. Long time have been service industry work, you know, and now with the gig economy, there's gig work, right? But you know, and this has been the case in the kind of hollowed out industrial towns in the Rust Belt as well, which is why places like Amazon can come in there. They can say to this majority black, majority kind of working class area, oh, we're going to give you $15 an hour, which is way better than what, you guys are used to. But it's still like, if you're comparing, like, you're comparing it to what it should be, it's still way far behind, like what working people in Bessemer and beyond really deserve.
They
And I guess,
patched
like,
the
you mentioned,
breadcrumbs. The breadcrumbs have
Yeah.
improved for the new build of corporate wage slavery.
Yeah, pretty much. And I guess the one thing I really wanted to stress, and this is like a quick aside, but I think it's important, kind of doing it, we're doing it right now, right? One of the things that I really want to say to people that I've been, like, so encouraged by, right? And so and it's really made me feel like I have, like, a purpose here, right? Is I've been so encouraged by the kind of effort, the collective effort of great independent media, and great kind of labor beat reporters kind of swarming to give this issue the coverage that it deserves, and give people the information, the context, and the voices that they need to understand the significance of this union vote and what it means for the South and for all of us, right? And in that vein, I studied, like, radical politics and labor history, like, in Mexico and in parts of the US, but not the South. That's not my area of specialty. So I've been fortunate enough to be able to rely on the amazing work of people like Robin D.G. Kelly, who you mentioned, people like Emily Gindelsberger, who worked at an Amazon fulfillment center and wrote a great book about it called On the Clock. Alex Press at Jacobin had an incredible interview with Michael Goldfield that gave some really great context to this. Luis Feliz Leon has done great reporting. Kim Kelly, we love her. She did great reporting down there with A More Perfect Union. And even beyond that, right? Like Chris Brooks at Labor Notes has written a lot of stuff about unionizing in the South that has really helped me. So have Strike Wave, a really great labor publication. Chris LaGrange at UCOM Live, Lauren Gurley at Vice. I say this to say there's a wealth of amazing people out there bringing this coverage that we used to never really have in this country, save for a few, people holding down the labor beat like Stephen Greenhouse or Sarah Jaffe, right? But now we have more people to give us that information. And it's a really beautiful thing to be a part of that, and for workers to see media, in this way, right? When I was down there, they were very excited that now, for these union organizers who've been around for a long time, right? They're not used to having this much attention on them, right? They're not used to people being this invested in their struggle. And that, you asked me earlier, Anders, about, like, kind of state of the labor movement in general. That's one crucial part, right? Is that there is more of an interest, there is more of a shifting kind of cultural sympathy for unions and working people. I think even though union density is at its lowest in like half a century, which is bad, and we have a lot of work to do there, public support of unions is like at its highest it's at the highest that it's been in a long time. Right. Because we are living in the society that the Reaganites wanted to create, right? The society in which organized labor has no power. Working people are, these vulnerable, movable, precarious, like, beings that can be shuttled from here and there. This is the world that ideology created. It may have sounded nice in the 90s and the 80s, right? But this is the reality, right? It's the reality of a few people holding all the wealth, all the power, and the rest of us being this kind of free-floating army of overexploited, surveilled, underprotected task rabbits who have no safety net. And unions, I think there's a lot of invigorated interest in unions because it is and has historically been, a union has been that mechanism for workers banding together and for workers having each other's back, and workers saying that, like, collectively, we are not going to take your shit anymore. We know what we are worth, and we are going to kind of fight for what we deserve. That's what I see happening in Bessemer. Yeah.
It's kind of exciting because, like we were talking about earlier with the minimum wage vote, it can feel really easy right now to feel lost in the woods as to where political power is in this country. Like 6 months ago, we did an episode on neo-feudalism, and people kind of thought that was out of nowhere, didn't understand why. But if you look at, like, something like Amazon, like how to make Amazon not treat people who work there like they are cows. You know, where you go to work and it feels like you're stuck in a Home Depot warehouse, kind of lost looking for the bathroom for 12 hours, then you get to leave. Despite the fact that they are as big as a state and they have an economy, it's a soft power as influential as a state, they do not. And this is the biggest thing. If you work for them, it feels like you are more of a part of Amazon than you are a part of America. Like America doesn't tell you when you get to pee. That's not, you don't get a broadcast for that. Although there was a moment where Trump was texting us where it was like, maybe this is very good. But that's the side part. Even though you are part of that, they are still, the decisions that they make are still decided in politics on local levels, on like a labor level. And if you can organize, if you can take the people who actually make the company go and push them together and give them directed purpose and just make a community effort out of it, you will affect politics in a more real way, or as real a way as someone who actually is an elected, politician. It's not neo-feudalism. It's still capitalism.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that, like, I mean, I think priority number one right now is supporting union efforts in places like Bessemer and getting as many Amazon warehouses unionized as possible. But step two, I really think, is not sort of the trust busting that some people are suggesting, that, we just have to break up Amazon into smaller firms. I really think it should be nationalization. That should be on the table, because it is so enormous, as we've been talking about. It's basically its own state, right? I don't think we can go back from that. It's either we let it keep increasing and this private power increase, or we take it over and use it as sort of the public utility that it's already been become, but we put that into public hands.
Mm-hmm. Well, Mike, sorry.
Go ahead.
Well, I got so excited by that point, because this is something that Danny Glover said to me when I interviewed him, right? Is because he said, he's like, if you take the fact that 85% of Amazon's workforce in Bessemer are Black, mm-hmm. right? He's like, unionization is actually kind of and if you also take if you also take the like we were talking about, the amount that Amazon has grown during the pandemic, this is also an issue of redistributing resources downward, right? In a way that the government has failed to do for so long. And I think that's another really important shift that the organizers and workers in Bessemer are pushing, right? Is that they are showing that unionization is a community issue. Like I said, it's an issue of democracy, but it is also an issue of redistributing those resources back to the people who need them. Because take what we were just talking about a couple minutes ago. Take how much money Amazon has made in during the pandemic, how much money Jeff Bezos himself has made. That is money that has come from us. That is money that has come from the people to buy these things, right? And to pay for these services. All of that, like, kind of collective wealth of the population has been siphoned up to a very small number of people. Imagine if we did do something like nationalize it, right? Or I guess what I'm saying is that for people who maybe balk at the notion of nationalizing Amazon, just table that for a second. Just think about it in terms of the wealth that we're talking about here. Mm-hmm. All the wealth that people have pooled into Amazon over the course of the pandemic, and where that wealth has gone and where it currently sits and what that wealth is doing and whom that wealth is serving right now. Now, imagine there was a way to take all that wealth that we, the consumers, and that the workers who make Amazon run created, and we were able to redistribute that back into the community. That would be more of a kind of shot in the arm, like, investment in our communities than like anything that's currently on the table. And yet, again, it's just this massive, obvious thing that we do not even consider a possibility, let alone like something even worth thinking about. But that is really what we should be talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I do want to talk about also, you had a great interview with Jennifer Bates, who's worker at the warehouse or the fulfillment center, excuse me, in Bessemer, and as well as an organizer. She's seems like she's very skilled at sort of beating back the talking points from these people who have been hired by management, and as you mentioned, the workforce, the wage workers at the fulfillment center are overwhelmingly Black. The management is overwhelmingly white, but the people they've hired to come in are also Black. But it seems like Jennifer and some others have actually been really successful at during these captive meetings, which, in case people don't know, that's you force the workers at a workplace that's considering unionization to sit in these meetings where they just go point by point through anti-union propaganda. But what are some of the ways that she has been able to, with the help of other union organizers, really inoculate, which I think is a really important process of unionization, inoculate the workers, her co-workers, against these anti-union talking points and strategies?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a great question, and I guess just the obvious answer that I would say is that folks should really go listen to that interview with Jennifer. She's done a lot of great interviews. I've got another interview coming out with her and Daryl Richardson, another worker there in Bessemer at the Real News Network, where they talk about this kind of stuff. And so they put it better than I ever could, right? But I think that, yeah, the question of inoculation has been really important, right? And this is where the union and workers like Jennifer and Daryl, who were among the group that reached out to the union in the first place, right? That's another anti-union narrative that Amazon's trying to push, right?
Right.
It is telling its workers, we don't need this outside third party coming in between us. Right. We can handle our problems ourselves. And workers have been, like Jennifer, have been rebutting that and saying, first of all, we have no fucking relationship, right? You don't listen to us. You tell us what to do, and you don't listen to us telling you why that doesn't work. And if it goes on long enough, you just fire us, right? That's not a relationship, right? That's a dictatorship. So they've been rebutting it that way, but they've also been saying is like, the union is not a third party. The union is us. We're the ones who got together because a lot of workers a lot of workers in this fulfillment center have come from outside of Bessemer as well, or moved to Bessemer to work there, right? And I think that's another thing to really underscore the significance of this drive is we are talking about a fulfillment center, which is a warehouse. They just call it a fulfillment center, so it doesn't sound as bad. A fulfillment center with 5,800 workers. That is really fucking big, right? When I was working at warehouses, like, we were a couple hundred, and that's it. And we were not being surveilled nearly to the level that Amazon is. We did not have to travel nearly as far in our massive warehouses as Amazon workers do. So I can't even understand how workers like Jennifer, who are older than me, are able to do that work, right? But the fact is that workers like Jennifer and Daryl have worked in unionized workplaces before. Mm-hmm. They came to Amazon, they started working, they started experiencing all those things that we were talking about, right? The breakneck workloads, the top-down surveillance, these decisions from management that had no input from workers themselves, including kind of measures to protect workers from COVID-19 and the so-called hero pay that Amazon offered its workers for 2 fucking months and then cut them off immediately without any real notice or input from workers. They just took that money away from them.
Those are the months they were heroes. And then after that, they were just back to guys who work in a warehouse.
We can be heroes just for one day. As David Bowie will say.
Really good. Well, and Adam and Nima at Citations Needed actually had a really great episode on the hero pay grift, right? Because they pointed out that there's a reason companies like Amazon called it hero pay and not hazard pay, because hero pay makes it seem like it's a benevolent way of the company recognizing the sacrifice that workers are making, but it does not acknowledge what they are sacrificing or where that sacrifice is coming from. It is coming from the hazards of going to work, right? Because that would put the burden on Amazon, right? So they called it hero pay, and everyone fucking bought it, right? Except the workers didn't, and the workers who got screwed over. But it was hazard pay. Workers deserve it, like they deserved it, a year ago during the pandemic. But companies like Amazon just took it away, right? And the reason I bring that up is because that was just another example of management making these unilateral decisions and just telling workers like that. There's another one where they said, like, you can't have your phone at your station, right? And they basically gave people no time to kind of adjust to that. It was just one night, no phones at your station. If you have your phone out, you get fired, right? So it was the breakneck workloads. It was the surveillance, the time off task shit, people trying to find bathrooms and coming back to their station, have managers say, you spent 10 minutes in the bathroom. Like, well, what if you have food poisoning, right? What if you have the runs? That you're a human being.
Yeah.
And Amazon is actively telling you, we do not recognize your humanity. If you go to the bathroom more than we think you should, you're fired, right? Yeah. And workers were like, well, this fucking sucks, right? I'm not being treated like a human being. I'm being treated like a robot, which is a line that I've heard from a lot of workers, is we get treated like robots. And so these workers, especially ones who had worked in a unionized workplace before, started getting together. They started talking. They said, I think we should bring in a union. And they started looking at options. They reached out to the RWDSU, the Retail, Wholesale, and Department Store Union, the South Council down there, President Randy Hadley, who's really great. I could listen to that guy talk for days. Big Mike, who people have seen down there. He's a poultry plant worker with the RWDSU, who is now a lead organizer down there at the South Council. They reached out to this local, brought him in to talk about the things that they were experiencing, and then they started the long process of this unionization drive that we are in right now, where workers are voting. They've been voting since early February, and the vote counting begins on March 29th. But yeah, I mean, like, I really can't put it better than people like Jennifer and Daryl and others have when they describe these working conditions and like how hard it is on your body, how hard it is on your mind. Like Jennifer, one thing that really stuck with me is Jennifer talked about going to work, sitting in the parking lot and seeing people kind of filter into Amazon, and just the men described in such painful terms the process of trying to psych yourself up to get out of the car and go back in for another day. Yeah. Like, it doesn't have to be that way. You shouldn't have to fear going into work, a thing that you have to do to put a roof over your head, right? It can be different, and workers there, I think, know that. And Amazon is trying to really remind not only those workers, but workers everywhere, no, it can't, because we don't want it to be different.
Right. I mean, yeah, that was the thing that really struck me about your interview with her. Number one, the amount of time that it takes to just recover from a work week there. She needs an entire day to just get her body to be able to do anything with her remaining time off. But it seemed like another thing she was really talking about that struck me was just, that humanity, being able to be treated like a person, right? Which, and that made me think of jobs that I've had where, like, it's still wage labor, it's inherently alienating and exploitative. But if you get a good job, there's still a sense of sort of, Jake and I are in a capital reading group, and we just read one of my favorite chapters, which is cooperation, where, you even in a capitalist system, there are ways where workers collaborate and actually are able to produce things together. And I think there really is a germ of socialism in that. And what it seems like people are fighting for there is to be able to, go to work and actually have some semblance of humanity and joy, whether it's, they're thinking of, I remember if you have a good job, you think about going to work and you get like a little excited. Like I'm looking forward to goofing off with this person or flirting with this person. Again, that is still within a terrible capitalist system, but there's at least something you can get out of work, some sense of fulfillment, and they're being robbed of that. So it seems like that's really what this struggle is about in many respects, is just being able to be human and be a person and have some semblance of dignity with your work. But one thing I did want to ask about too was, so Alabama is a right to work state, as are a lot of states in the South and all over the country. And one of the things that's come up in these captive audience meetings is the anti-union people will say, like, oh, they make you pay dues, right? Which that used to be the way unions work in most of the country, right? Even if you don't want to join the union, if you work there, you got to pay dues. But because it's a right to work state, you don't actually have to pay dues, which has come as sort of become sort of an effective rebuttal against that, and that's specific to right to work law. Is that obviously we're all against right to work, but is that sort of a blessing in disguise that you can at least rebuff that with the fact that because it's right to work, it's not actually making people join a union and pay dues against their will?
It's a really interesting question, and I guess so by way of answering it, I just wanted to do one quick parenthetical follow up to the
Sure.
point you were just making, because I thought it was a really important point, right? Like where Jennifer Bates, was talking about, we deserve to be human and we deserve to be treated like we are human. And this is something that Michael Foster, Big Mike, has also been saying, right? He's like, it's not just about like obviously some jobs are still going to be shit. Like I used to have to work at a factory where we sifted through the blood, shit, and piss covered laundry from hospitals in the area. There's no way to make that job any nice, right? It was awful. But it still has to be done, right? But there's a way to do it that doesn't kind of grind workers into dust, that doesn't kind of exploit them. And that the point that I wanted to make was because you mentioned that Jennifer said that, on the job it's so grueling, but then on your day off, quote unquote, you're just so worn out that you just sit there on the couch and can't even do anything. And so it's also a question of being able to be human outside of work. Right. Like I said, we're not naive. We know that some jobs are still going to fucking suck, but but they still have to be done. But there are still ways that we can protect working people and honor the humanity of all workers, right? By making sure that they're not just doing that work to pay bills and pay rent and go back and do it again, right? Big Mike has been saying this a lot. He's like, we deserve to be able to take vacations. We deserve, to take our kids to see the beach for the first time, right? We deserve to enjoy our breaks and enjoy our time off and not be so exhausted that we can't even do anything but rest and recover for the next day when we have to go back into it. So I just really want to underscore that, because I think it's a really effective piece of messaging from the folks down there. But more than messaging, it's just a really important principle that I think we should all get behind. Now, to go. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say, super obvious, quick observation here too about the dues thing. Are dues restrictive to forming a union? Is it easier to make one without dues? The dues give power to the union. Crazy idea. Having money is where power comes from.
Right.
It's much harder to make a strike happen if there is no bank of cash that goes out to everybody.
No, yeah, exactly. I'm all about dues, but it just that point of that propaganda line of it's this, you're forced against your will into this thing that you don't have much say in, which is bullshit. But does the fact that they are right to work, and that isn't technically true in a place like Alabama, make it easier to get in the union? But on the other hand, will that, if they are to unionize, is that going to pose some problems with the fact that it is a right to work state and not all workers are going to want to pay dues or even join the union? Yeah,
I'm just saying, you don't have to galaxy brain everything. Sometimes you are saving money for a reason.
Right. Well, have you guys ever seen that I think it was late 90s, that movie The Edge with Anthony Hopkins?
Never heard of it.
I don't think
it's so. Anthony Hopkins and Alec Baldwin get lost in the Canadian wilderness or something, and then a man-eating bear starts hunting them. It's a ridiculous movie. It's a ridiculous movie, but it's one of those ones that caught me at that junior high era, and I was just so fascinated by it. But anyway, I bring it up for a reason. Because when Anthony Hopkins, right, he plays this I don't know, wise billionaire or whatever. These guys have no wilderness training, right? And so when they have this bear after them that's already eaten and killed one of their party, they're trying to figure out how to defend themselves, right? And so they go back. The way the movie paints this, right, is they go back to kind of the ancient native kind of strategies for hunting bears, right, and defending ourselves against bears, which is you get these sticks, you sharpen them, you burn the tips so that they're durable, and then like you get the bear to chase you down into a ravine, and you back yourself up against a wall, and the bear raises up on its haunches and goes to lunge at you, and you prop your spear up so that the bear actually uses its own weight to impale itself, right?
Oh, like judo.
Sure, yeah. Right, but like the reason I bring that up is to kind of connect it to Andrew's point, which is that right to work, a racist, shitty, anti-worker kind of movement, we could call it, from the conservative movement that is systematically again empowered the bosses and disempowered workers for a long time. And like right to work as a slogan, right? It does not mean what you think it means. It was crafted in a lab to convey something that is the opposite of what it actually does, right? But to Andrews's point, right to work has been one of those things historically that has built up the bear of that is the bosses, right? That is like places like Amazon. It has been a muscle in this massive enemy that is hunting us, that is chasing us, that is exploiting us, right? And so in this case, you could see that as like to flesh out this kind of loose analogy, that could be a way in which Amazon's and union busting rhetorical tactics are actually part of the thing that is impaling it, because it doesn't have the weight that it wants it to have. So I think, Anders, the connection you're making there, right, is that Amazon is trying to convince its workers not to unionize by saying, look, like they're basically admitting that, like, look, you struggle to get by enough as it is, even on the $15 that we pay you. So imagine taking $500 more out of your paychecks and going to the union, and they paint it as if like that money just disappears and you see no benefit. Right. To Alex's point, it's not like the dues actually give the union the power to represent workers and fight for workers, yada, yada, yada. So Amazon has been telling these workers, oh, these dues are going to come out of your wallet. It's going to keep you from being able to buy more and do more with the wages that you make here at Amazon. But because of right to work, because of the shitty ways that it has been set up, to right to work, the whole point of right to work is to throttle unions and make it harder for unions to even happen in the first place, and then to even do what they are supposed to do if they are kind of voted for by the workers, because right to work means that you cannot kind of legally mandate that all the workers represented in the bargaining unit have to pay dues, but they still get the benefits of the collective bargaining, whether or not they pay those dues, right? So it basically creates an incentive for workers to benefit from the union, but it gives them the incentive to not have to pay dues, which prevents the union from being able to do what it wants to do, so on and so forth, right? So that could be a case where Amazon now, like the bear impaling itself, is trying to use this muscle of right to work to scare people about the $500 that will be coming out of their paycheck. But it has impaled itself on the bare fact that, like, well, if I don't want to pay union dues, then that $500 is not going to come out of my paycheck. So I might as well just vote for it anyway, right? So it is an instance where one instance where right to work bullshit is actually kind of working against Amazon. I mean, it doesn't justify that doesn't make right to work okay, but in this instance, like Andrews is saying, it does kind of undercut the union busting that Amazon is trying to do.
Right.
I just want to say, just quick interjection, as helpful a political analogy as it is, bears do not hunt like that. They only do that when they're very distressed. They're territorial animals. If you're being attacked by a bear, you have infringed upon the bear. Stay away from bears. Stay away from bears.
I've heard. I have no idea what to do if I ever encounter a bear, because I've heard so many different things about. Some people say
it varies bear to bear.
Okay, yeah, but you need to carry around a guidebook, I guess, to bears, because some you're supposed to yell at, others you're supposed to play dead, others supposed to run. Like, there's no.
I believe it is the big ones you have to play dead, and the smaller ones you yell at.
Okay.
Yeah, I remember.
Use your guts there.
The one time I went to Alaska, with my family. We had this guy kind of like driving us around the Yukon in like a Suburban. He was like a very low budget guide, but he was great. And we were asking him about bears. We were like, what do we do if we see a bear? And he was very kind of blasé about it. He's like, oh, well, if it's a black bear, you can take him. Just go up to him and sock him in the face. Right.
Nice.
And so then, yeah. And he's like, but if it's a grizzly bear, grizzlies, because they're more medium sized, tend to be more aggressive, yada, yada, yada. And then I was like, what if like a Kodiak comes up to you? He's like, well, Kodiak, you just lay down and hope that he nibbles on your head a little bit and doesn't like the taste. He's like, that's the best you can do. Right. But yeah, to Alex's point, The Edge as a movie may not be the most accurate depiction of what to do if a bear is chasing you, but the analogy from The Edge is the best way that I could describe what Amazon is doing.
Oh, the spear thing. I mean, that was very insightful. I'm just saying, I just don't want people to go around looking and finding bears to learn from them themselves. That's not what the show endorses.
I mean, I personally carry toilet paper with me in the woods in case I run into a Charmin bear, because I've been taught that that's the best thing to do. Two quick questions before. Well, I do want to ask very briefly. Do you think this has how strong are the odds that they are going to unionize in Bessemer?
Oh boy. Well, if the past few years from Donald Trump getting elected to COVID-19 have taught me anything, it's to be very humble with making political predictions. But, I will say, because again, like everyone down there in Bessemer is not naive. They know that Amazon is pulling out all the stops to disencourage workers from voting for the union. We've heard stories reported by some of the people I mentioned earlier, right? Kim Kelly, I think, broke the story that Amazon had actually changed one of the traffic lights coming out of its fulfillment center, because I went and stood by the RWDSU organizers who sit at those exits during shift change, because workers will be leaving the parking lot. They'll be driving down to these different traffic lights. And that is the moment when organizers off Amazon's property can come up to them and say, like the workers will say, oh, they told us this, right? They scared us about this. What do you have to say about that? And they'll give them some pamphlets. They'll answer their questions. So Amazon actually changed one of the lights. It petitioned the city to change one of those lights so that as soon as a car rolls up, the light turns green and the organizers don't have time to go up and talk to them, right? Amazon says that it did that because there was traffic buildup. There are like 5 exits to this massive fulfillment center. People are leaving kind of at different times. There's no traffic buildup. That's bullshit. Yeah. But on top of that, workers are getting anti-union text messages every day. They're anti-union messages in bathroom stalls. So like it's like people feel like it's really invading their privacy. Their mailers were sent out encouraging workers to drop off their ballots at a post box, a mailbox that just appeared on Amazon property, like in front of the entrance. And so workers feel like, well, if I go up and drop my ballot in there, they're going to be watching me. So it feels like an intimidation tactic, right? On top of that, you mentioned the captive audience meetings that these outside consultants with management are holding to really try to scare people.
Didn't they stop doing those? Is that they started to? That's what Jennifer was saying, that they don't do them anymore, or she was able to to rebut enough stuff to where it didn't make sense for them to keep doing it, or are they still doing the captive audience meetings?
So there are a couple of different stories here. There's one where people like Jennifer have reported that during these meetings, when workers who knew how to rebut the union busting talking points would stand up and say that point is bullshit, you're not telling the full story. There's at least one story of the people running these meetings calling them up, taking a picture of their badge number, and then sending them out of the meeting, so that they could, they wouldn't have them back in the meeting to rebut their points. There are also stories of managers and these consultants walking around to the stations with like a water bottle and a bottle of Coke and saying, hey, can I take 5 minutes of your time to scare the shit out of you, so you don't vote for this union kind of thing.
Oh, they should phrase it differently.
Right. Yeah, they should work on that. So there's a lot of union busting going on. And the vote counting, like I said, begins on March 29th. people are expecting that Amazon's going to contest some ballots, so it's going to be a dogfight. And I guess it's one of those things where, like with, I guess, the Bernie Sanders campaign, people know and expect that there are going to be underhanded tactics from the party that holds most of the power.
Right.
And you would be wrong not to have a healthy kind of fear of that and skepticism of that, and try to plan for that. Randy Hadley, the president of the RWDSU South Council there in Birmingham, told me, he's like, this is David versus Goliath. And what that means for us is we have to punch Goliath in the face every day, because if we give it an inch, it is going to kind of undo a lot of the work that we have been doing. So that's a long-winded way of saying that workers there are very hopeful. I noticed that people were saying, not if we win, but when we win, this is going to happen, right? So I do think that the fact that, like, for instance, the workers were able to cross the 30% threshold, signing union authorization cards pretty easily at such a big factory. Like, that's something that scared Amazon, because normally it's a struggle even to get to that 30% threshold of people signing those cards. In Bessemer, that wasn't the case. So there are a significant number of people there, but again, it's 5,800 people. They're getting a lot of pressure every day from Amazon. They're getting fears put in their mind that there are going to be layoffs, that even the plant will close down, right? That the union is going to do all these horrible things, and yada, yada, yada. So it really is a question of will, right? And it's a question of kind of keeping the public support up, of combating that anti-union propaganda that workers are getting every day, of showing support for those workers and the union, not just in a kind of nominal, oh, this is a cool thing happening way, but actually in a substantive, what do you need kind of way, a way where we can show support and solidarity for these workers as human beings who deserve, the dignity and protection that a union brings, not just because it's a shiny new object in the political discourse of our day. And I think that we have been seeing that, right? And that gives me a lot of hope that this union drive will be successful.
Right. Yeah. I mean, the fact that Amazon was not able to make sure the election was held directly at the workplace, I think, is a huge plus, right? Because they have less ability to intimidate or coerce people, like casting their ballots, and they're further away from the ballots, which is a pretty crucial thing too. And also, like, if this, I mean, as bad as Biden is, the fact that this is being held now and not, 6 months ago, I think makes a pretty big difference because of the NLRB, right? They, it's not the NLRB we ultimately want, but it is not one that's actively trying to destroy the labor movement. So that, I think, is a plus, right? And this is the reason a lot of socialists, the only reason a lot of people I know voted for Biden anyway.
It's a step up. It's a step up for sure.
Right. But one thing I do want to make sure to ask you about before we get out of here is an episode you did recently with No Evil Foods, which is or you did about No Evil Foods anyway, which is like a vegan meat company in North Carolina, which is like this has a very social justice oriented brand, but not necessarily social justice oriented practices. They busted prevented a union from forming. And not only that, the episode you did was taken off Libsyn, right? Because they were able to talk to the algorithm people and get it removed for really no justifiable reason. But what happened there? I mean, this is a company, by the way, I think you said they have a Che Guevara sausage, right?
Yep.
Che Guevara famously loved sausage.
Yeah, Che Guevara famously loves vegan sausage and union busting.
You could always catch him at a ball game munching one of his famous Che Guevara Franks.
I mean, they say union busting is disgusting, but so is the food here, it sounds like, at least to a omnivore like me. But
got him.
You've been able to get the episode back up. Is that right?
Yeah, no, I appreciate you asking about this, because it's, it really is kind of, I think, a bright spot, you know, in, you know, we all hustle in independent media, right? We do all this work because we believe in it, right? We don't, none of us think that, like, you know, one podcast is going to save the world, but there's a lot of time and labor that goes into it that we do because we care about the work that we do. And you know, we want it to be something that's good and useful and entertaining and enjoyable and informative for people who watch or listen to it, right? And in the case of this episode that I did back in the summer, yeah, I interviewed, I believe it was 4 former employees of No Evil Foods. Actually, it may have been 5, who were involved in the union drive at No Evil Foods. They were trying to unionize with the UFCW, and they were unsuccessful. And No Evil Foods, like you said, is this kind of vegan meat company that really bakes into its messaging and its branding, right, this notion that it's progressive, that it's punk rock, right, that this ain't your mama's vegan meat company. I don't know. You know, but you know, it's very much part of the branding, right, that it is more progressive, or even left leaning. That all came to a crashing halt as soon as they got wind that their workers were trying to organize. Immediately, as the workers told me, as they describe on that episode, they said immediately the mood changed, right? And suddenly it was kind of, you know, it was hostile. There were these captive audience meetings where our punk rock, you know, tattooed and pierced bosses were suddenly scaring us, you know, and using, we talked about Kirsten Cinema, right? That's one of the grossest things, is that the bosses there, this progressive quote unquote company, were trying to, again, use progressive talking points to be union busters, right? They tried to use, like, sexual assault. They tried to say, like, you know, the union's going to make you work with your harasser, right? You know, like, you're not going to be able to come to us and we're not going to be able to handle it, right? You know, or the union is just like run by a bunch of old white guys who don't care about, you know, workers of color, stuff like that. Like, it was very gross stuff. So I would highly encourage folks to read up on that failed union drive and all the union busting that this shitty company did. But to talk about the podcast episode itself, what we did was we worked with some of the workers there who had actually recorded audio from those union busting meetings. And North Carolina is a one-party consent state, so it was legal to obtain those recordings, right? Because if the person who's recording them consents, that's all you need, right? So then they sent us, you know, the original files, and we actually put up. We started that episode on No Evil Foods with like 8 minutes of clips from the union busting meetings, which people told me, they're like, I've never been as angry before listening to a Working People episode as I was listening to that one.
Yeah, I had to punch something.
Yeah, and so then afterwards, No Evil Foods, you know, filed a Digital Millennium Copyright Act, DMCA takedown request with Libsyn, saying that we were infringing on copyrighted material. And then Libsyn immediately took the episode down, and we had to kind of really, like, fight and petition to get it put back up. We had to prove that No Evil Foods was not only didn't have a legal grounding under fair use, right? You know, to claim that, like, we couldn't use these recordings, right? That would be like, you know, a news channel not being able to use recordings of politicians, right? You know, like that, the fair use allows us to kind of use this stuff to report on. And the context of the episode was very clear how we were using those recordings. And it wasn't just us, right? It was Dixieland of the Proletariat, another great podcast. They got their episode taken down. The Industrial Worker, the publication, I think it was Andrew Miller, he had an article that was taken down. Lauren Gurley at Vice had posted recordings from there, and they got them taken down from Vice, right? So this progressive company was doing everything it could to hide from, to basically abuse copyright law and use it improperly to try to keep the public in the dark about its union busting efforts, which is just so gross, and it pisses me off so much, and it makes me so glad that we, as a group, right, as a group of we were working with the workers and with you know, the like I said, Dixieland of the Proletariat and other kind of media folks. We got support from you know, some really great kind of legal entities who were kind of giving us kind of advice, and we were able to basically defend ourselves and point out that No Evil Foods was full of shit, that they were even lying, right? In their takedown request. Like, they actually used a fake name to file that request. And Libsyn had actually said, I've never seen anyone file a DMCA takedown request using a fake name before. Like, this blows my mind. So we were able to get the episode back up, as was Dixieland of the Proletariat. But, the fact of the matter is that the union busting efforts was still successful. The workers that I talked to were still out of, they weren't working there anymore. And it's been a year since that failed union vote. And there's still a lot of pain there and a lot of injustice that needs to kind of be addressed. And No Evil Foods needs to be held accountable for what they've done.
Yeah. Well, if you're listening and in the midst of eating some vegan meat, throw it away. If it's No Evil Foods, don't buy their stuff. Not that ultimately with this isn't about consumer choices, but hopefully there will be another union drive there and maybe in a boycott to go with it. I do want to end on sort of a positive note, if that's all right. Very briefly. There is obviously we didn't get the $15 minimum wage put in the COVID relief package, but there is a drive now nationally to pass the PRO Act, which could change the game for labor unions and the working class across the country. Just as we're rounding out here, what are some of the things that the PRO Act will do, and what are the odds that you think it'll pass?
Yeah, I mean, I think I appreciate the way you framed the question too, because this has been another adjustment for me, going from being more of an independent media producer to being the editor in chief of a nonprofit news network. So now I have to be very careful about endorsing legislation or stuff like that. But I can answer the questions you asked me, right? Like, what would it do, and what hope does it have of passing, right? But I guess. First thing I would say is that at Working People, we actually did a special episode about a month and a half ago with members of the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades. It was a really great episode on the PRO Act and what it would do and what it would mean for workers and organizers on the ground. So I'd highly encourage folks to check that out. But just to kind of distill some of what we talked about, the PRO Act is and would be, a truly monumental shift in labor relations in this country, and it would undo. I mean, it's not a silver bullet. It's not going to solve everything. And the movement, the working class movement that we need to build is going to take tons of mobilization from the grassroots up. It's not going to be made from some legislation that's kind of sprinkled down from the top. But, workers and unions are really behind the PRO Act because they know how significant it would be and how much more power they would have in the workplace and with their organizing if it was passed. First thing to note is it would repeal right to work nationwide, right? That in itself should be enough of a reason for people to be interested and invested in this legislation. But as Jim Williams, the general vice president of IUPAT, kind of told me, it's like it would also make it a lot easier for workers to organize. It would it would give us more of an ability to hold companies accountable for kind of union busting and for retaliating against workers who are trying to organize. It really does cover a shit ton of ground that we've already been talking about, right? We've been talking about why unions and workers are playing so far behind the bosses when it comes to organizing. The PRO Act would really kind of give a big boost, right, to workers who want to organize by removing a lot of those legal and institutional barriers that they face right now. And then it wouldn't undo entirely the terror of Taft-Hartley, but it would be a big start. As far as the the chances it has to pass, right? I mean, we've already seen from the Biden administration and the Democrats who took the House and the Senate in November and have summarily used that opportunity squander all the fucking good faith that they had from the voting public who voted for them because they were told they would get the minimum wage would be raised to $15 an hour. You would get immediate COVID relief. $2,000 checks would go out the door immediately. And they didn't fucking do that. They means tested the shit out of it. Now they're putting conditions on it. They're doing what Democrats always fucking do, which is fuck up the bag and spurn the very people who braved a pandemic to vote their asses in office. And now they're going to lose all that goodwill immediately. And they're going to lose in the fucking midterms. And then we're going to be right back to where we were before, where the Democrats do shit. The Republicans are able to impose their will, and working people are the ones who are going to get screwed over again and again, right? So I say that to say that, like, right now, the current Democratic administration and the Democrats in Congress are not giving me a lot of hope. However, because they have not made good on their other kind of more progressive promises, right? The one area where they could get a significant amount of that goodwill back, right, is in labor, right? And it's because, Biden, he campaigned on saying he's going to be the most pro-union president ever. And even though Joe Biden did not fully endorse the Amazon union drive this past weekend, the fact that he came out with that public statement in support of unions and in support of workers organizing is still significant. I mean, it's still all rhetoric, and it's not, it's not going to solve everything. But
I mean, he
still
said Amazon should not be able to coerce anyone into not voting for it, which to us, that's a very half-hearted statement, but that is probably the most pro-union statement a president has made since, I don't know, Johnson.
Right, in our lifetimes at least, right? And so to wrap up, I think the one thing that is important to highlight that Jim Williams from the Painters Union kind of told me is, he's like, look, we learned our lesson, right? Obama gave us a similar promise with the Employer Free Choice Act, right? He got a lot of support from unions for that. And then as soon as he got in office, he dropped it like a bad habit, right? So we had been burned before. We remember being burned before, and we're not going to make the same mistake again. So a lot of unions are not kind of just hoping that Biden and Congress kind of give them this gift. They are really trying to build popular support for this legislation so that they can push it through with popular bottom-up pressure. And there's a really interesting discussion that I had with kind of the Painters Union folks about what this means for the labor movement, and how unions need to and are kind of building bonds of solidarity with other unions, with other community organizations and other causes for justice, to build that sort of bottom up solidarity, that working class solidarity that has enough power to successfully pressure Congress and Biden to pass something like the PRO Act. That's how they're thinking about it. That, I think, is really exciting. But as we started our conversation with, right, the ruling class is not going to give us what we need, right? They're never going to give it out of the goodness of their own hearts, right? What did Lyndon Johnson supposedly say to Martin Luther King? Like, I know what I need to do, but you need to make me do it.
Yeah.
Right. That's kind of the situation here. So I guess I'm hopeful, and I'm very hopeful in the effort that I've seen from kind of the labor movement to, build up popular support for the PRO Act. But I guess I would say I would not underestimate the ability of Congress to disappoint us.
Yeah.
But it has already passed, right? The first version already passed last year, but it went nowhere, right? So it could pass again. So anyway, that was one final point I wanted to make. But yeah, I mean, it could pass. But I guess, unions are not kind of just going to hope that politicians are going to kind of, out of their own sense of benevolence towards working people, that they're going to make it a priority. Because their priority is going to be fucking bombing Syria. Their priorities are always going to be like, empowering the ruling class, right? They need to be made to feel that this is going to be a priority, or you and your job as a politician is going to be, you may not have a job, right, if you don't do this.
Do your part and scare a wealthy person in your neighborhood.
Right. Here's hoping. Yeah. One of the things I'm excited about is DSA. The Green New Deal campaign is mobilizing on behalf of the PRO Act, or organizing on behalf of it, I should say, which I think is really important that we, have the environmental and labor movement sort of combined. Well, yeah, this has been a great conversation. Where can people find you?
Oh shit. I'm on, find me on Twitter. I think it's at @Maximil_ALV. Follow Working People on Twitter at Working Pod. Please follow the Real News Network and donate to us because we're doing really cool shit, but we can't do it without everyone's support. Check out my interview with Danny Glover, and we've got lots more Amazon Union Drive stuff coming out through the month of March, which is I'm really excited for. And yeah, I mean, just type in the name. It's Maximilian with 2 L's, not 1 L. And I'm sure I'll pop up, but I really appreciate, you guys having me on, and this is a fun conversation.
Yeah. Thanks for doing it.
Thanks for coming. Anders, do you have anything?
Just at Andersley here on Twitter, Dursley1 Instagram. Check out Redacted Tonight on Portable.tv. That's my other job. And check out the Patreon. We got some good episodes. We do have, sort of in a similar vein to Working People. We're doing a series that I think we're going to update soon. We're going to do another installment of Thank You for Your Service, where we talk about working in the service industry with service workers.
Hell yeah. That's awesome. The more people who are doing that, the better. That's really fucking cool. And I just wanted to say, awesome. Great job. Everyone go support that.
Thank you. All right. Alex, you got anything?
You can just follow me on Twitter at Patak Jokes. I'll put all my stuff on there.
All right. It is finished.
It's finished.